So first I'd like to say I think we're very, very fortunate to live in this time that we do right now. It's pretty amazing to be a GIS professional or a geodesigner. We benefit from lots of things that have happened, the evolution of standards, the evolution of technology and platforms, and today we're in a very unique position. We have wider access to authoritative data than we've ever had before. We have access to tools which allow us to integrate that disparate data in meaningful ways. We also have access to analytic tools which let us mine that data for every bit of information that we can and turn data into more meaningful information. And on top of that, we've got some really great visualization tools. We have some really great tools that allow us to collaborate, and we also have some really great tools which allow for citizen engagement. And all of these are very, very important factors. And I think all of these factors come into play as we work with geodesign. Now, geodesign is not just about putting forth the best design, but it's about putting forth the best design that's both achievable and sustainable. So without that, the very best design just sits on the bookshelf. So we're fortunate to be where we are today. I think, now those are pretty big words. And recently a colleague of mine, they're big in terms of the font as well, a colleague of mine told me a really interesting story that I really love this. His name is Bill Meehan. Perhaps some of you know him. Bill is the manager for our utilities industry. And he told me of a conversation that he had with an executive from a utility company. And they'd had some problems with their customers. And they were about to implement a very large and expensive rearrangement of assets and infrastructure to solve some of these problems. Now, these were not only expensive, but they were far-ranging, far-reaching, and extended many years into the future. And Bill asked this executive, he said, "Are you sure, are you confident that this will achieve your goals?" And this person, who was not a GIS user, said, "Well, I think they can." Geography is both a science, it's the context that we live in, everything's about location. Our mission is to turn geography and location into something more meaningful, to turn that into geographic understanding. So what we want to do is turn the I think into I know or I understand. So how do we do that? We use GIS as a platform to gain geographic understanding. So that's the platform, ArcGIS is the platform that I use every day to turn location and geography into more than that, geographic understanding. Now, many years ago, when I started at Esri, ArcGIS was software that was installed on a machine. At the time, it was a very large machine. It was a Prime mini computer that sat in the back room of one of the offices, which no longer exists here today. But today, ArcGIS is a collection of a lot of things. It's a collection of applications. It's a collection of data, it's a collection of services and APIs that serve lots of different kinds of users. They're for professionals, they're for knowledge workers, they're for developers, and they're also for geographic information consumers. These can be implemented and used in a variety of different contexts by individuals in work groups that we might work in with geodesign. Organizations and even entire governments can use GIS as a platform to gain geographic understanding. And the way that that can be accessed today is through the cloud, through the desktop, by publishing services and on mobile devices. All of this together represents a very powerful ecosystem which we can use to gain geographic understanding. Now, this afternoon, what I'd like to do is highlight a few technology areas. Now, some of these are products which exist today but still evolve. So ArcGIS Online, I know many of you are familiar with that. I'll highlight some of that and some new things. And Community Analyst, which is also a very popular and powerful product for geodesign. But there's a couple of new things I'm going to add here as well that have not been shown so much publicly before. That's the Landscape Analyst and some geo-enrichment tools. And I think all of these together are very important for what we want to do in GIS and geodesign. But let's begin with ArcGIS Online. I think if I could pick any technology that's happened during my tenure at Esri that has radically changed the way we think about and use GIS, ArcGIS Online is it. So it's grown from a simple framework for sharing data into a deeply integrated and integral component of the ArcGIS platform. It also represents for many users a new pattern for implementing GIS. It doesn't necessarily replace existing patterns, but it integrates with those and extends them into the cloud and into web and mobile capabilities. Now, ArcGIS Online provides some very interesting capabilities, which I'll highlight here in just a moment. These enable us to store and manage our content, to create, publish, and share maps and applications easily. They also enable self-service mapping, so no longer does the GIS department have to be responsible for everybody's mapping needs, but others can leverage the authoritative information that GIS professionals might create in their own practices and their own work. And it also fosters collaboration, and there's still a lot more coming. Now, one of the things I unfortunately was not able to show you today was a new framework that will be part of ArcGIS Online starting in March, and that includes geoprocessing tools. So you can do your online analysis in the cloud with ArcGIS Online starting in March. But because of where we are with development, I wasn't able to bring those to you here today. Now, one important foundation of ArcGIS Online is something called a web map. Now, at Esri, a web map is a lot more than a map in a browser. To the development teams, it's a specification, and that specification ensures that web maps can be used across a variety of different applications and on many different devices. But to us, as GIS professionals and geodesigners, a web map is a way to capture knowledge and to capture our trade skills, our trade work, and to be able to make that shareable and more available to others. We build maps with those. We tell stories with those, but I think even more importantly what we can do is we can create geographic conversations. So you listen to a story, but you participate in a conversation, and I think that's what geodesign is about. It's about creating geographic conversations to help arrive at the best possible design. Another very interesting part of ArcGIS Online is Esri Maps for Office. So I often, in fact I always, think of the world as in a map-centric way, because that's what I work with every day. I start with a map first, but we know that there's lots of people that start with a spreadsheet first. So they can also be enabled through Esri Maps for Office to participate in this ecosystem of geographic understanding, and they can use familiar tools that they work with every day, like an Excel spreadsheet, to be able to contribute their knowledge and their workflows back. Here's just a little quick example. I've taken the liberty of embedding a little ArcGIS Online map in here. So you can see this is a live map in the context of my PowerPoint presentation that I can explore a little bit. So just a very little simple example, but yet an example of how GIS can pervade an entire office or an entire enterprise. What I'd like to do next is I'd like to switch over, and we're going to take a look at ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to highlight just a few things. All right, technology is on my side today. Okay, this is a website that everybody should be familiar with. It's arcgis.com, and anybody can go here and begin using this. We think of this as a site for public use. Anybody can go here and begin exploring the maps and the content that we find. And there's all sorts of interesting things. So here's an application. This is a story map. I'll talk about these a little more in just a minute. But this is a story map about the crisis in Syria. And it presents me some interesting information. I actually learned a lot by just playing with this story map and exploring, clicking on a few things, and learning more about what's happening there. And you'll find many other examples that are featured here in the Esri Gallery ribbon. There's also a gallery of featured maps and applications that you can access, and you can explore these and you can build on top of any map that you see here. But increasingly, what's happening is organizations, local governments, government agencies across the globe are leveraging this public framework for use in their own GIS organizations. And let me show you a few examples of what some of those look like. This is the North Carolina Department of Transportation. So you can see it has a similar layout, but yet a very different look and feel. Instead of the Esri featured base maps, what we have are featured maps that come from the North Carolina Department of Transportation and also the ones that they chose to put in their gallery. So they've taken ArcGIS Online and they've branded it as their own. Here's another example. This is the city of Salem, Oregon. And they also have their own featured maps with some very interesting applications, a park finder, council wards, interesting information that people within their organization and also the public can use. Here's one of my favorites. This is a very nice looking site. This is the Montana Census and Economic Information Center. And you can see how they've branded the content that you find on their site. So this tells me that it's authoritative. It's coming directly from the source. And these are things that I can rely on because it's coming from the very source of the very best information about census and economic development in Montana. Let's take a look at one more. Here's the city of Charlotte. City of Charlotte is a great site, very interesting site, and what they've done is they've leveraged the power of web maps in application templates to tell some very interesting stories. So here's an interesting story which helps us learn more about how the city of Charlotte is embarked upon a program to be more green. So I can click various topics and I can explore the map and learn more about these. Some nice pictures, some nice pop-ups. Now these are not difficult to do. These are super simple for anybody to do, and let's take a look at how that works. To do that, I'm switching to an organization that I've created. So I am the administrator for the organization, so I can take you behind the scenes and show you a few things. So the organization is constituted by people that belong to it. So I'm using some live data that's published publicly by the City of Washington, D.C., and I've come up with some users as placeholders, but users, when they participate, they can be assigned different roles. You can be a user, you can be an administrator, or you can be a publisher. If you're a publisher, that means that you can publish services through Esri's cloud-hosted capabilities without needing your own server. So some powerful capabilities there. I won't spend a lot of time in the administration part of this, but let's take a look at some other things. So here's our featured gallery ribbon, and here's our featured gallery with lots of assets that my organization might want to use in their daily work. And typically what we found that happens is that organizations organize themselves into groups, and groups logically represent the way that an organization organizes itself. It could be around projects, it could be around departments. Typically, it's around both. Now, some of these groups here are building blocks for my organization, and others represent projects that we're working on. For example, this one here, which is called the Redevelopment Project Group. So this might represent a group with lots of members that are collaborating over a design project. Let's take a look at one of these. So here's a map that I'll open, and this has some city information. Actually, what we're looking at is a heat map that I created in ArcGIS for desktop, which shows where hotspots for crime are within the city. Obviously something we want to factor into our redevelopment here. But why might the crime be happening there? I can leverage the power of mashups to search for additional layers that I can add to my map to provide more meaning. So let's look for income. And here's a list of related layers that match that I can begin to add to my map. So let's take a look at median net worth. I can preview it, and let's go ahead and add it to my map. Now we can do some additional refining. I'm authoring right now. I'm a map author, and what I might want to do is adjust the transparency so I can still identify those crime areas underneath. Or what I might want to do is move it down in the list so I can see those on top. Or I can be even more clever, and what I can do is make that transparency 100%, but that data is still underneath my crimes, so when I click on it, I can look at information about the median net worth, and I can see it's represented in a very nice style here. I can see right here where this hotspot is that the median net worth is greatest for those that earn less than $15,000 a year. So we can glean all sorts of information just by bringing it together in our map. Now, another piece of information that we often have might exist in the context of spreadsheets or text files. So here's a text file of places of interest in Washington, D.C. And to map this, and this is the audience participation part. Those of you that have seen this before know what your job will be. So let's map this. Now we know that's difficult to do in GIS sometimes, but here I just drag and drop it on my map and there we are. Thank you for that participation. So very quickly I've created a very interesting map which provides information about these places of interest, and this is what they look like so far. I can click on this link and I can get more information about that place of interest, and I can also click and we'll view a little thumbnail of that. But as a map author I can also make this more meaningful to my intended users, so let's go ahead and style this a little bit better. We'll go down and we'll change the symbols, and instead of using orange dots we'll choose from a library of symbols. I'll go to my people and places, and since these are places of interest, let's choose this symbol and apply that to my map. So already I've got a better looking map. I can also refine the pop-up experience, the way that information is presented, and I do that by configuring the pop-up. And I'll do this pretty quickly and we'll just take a look at the result. For the title of the pop-up, we'll choose the place. Instead of displaying a list of attributes, I'm going to choose the contents of one field, the description field, to highlight in the map, in the pop-up. And next I will add an image, and we'll do something a little tricky here. I'm going to add the text, click for more information, and you'll see what we'll do here in just a moment. And now I'm going to pull out for each of these features the image that we popped up just a moment ago, and when you click on that image we'll follow it to a link about more information. So now I've got a pretty cool map. So I've got a very nice pop-up which presents information in a very meaningful way. I have the title at the top, the description, I have a little thumbnail image, and when I click on that image I link to a website which provides even more details. So you can see how easy this is. It's very simple to create very interesting maps, and behind this I still have all that information about the median net worth. So all that is represented here. Now from here what I'd like to do is save this because I'd like to share it with others. So I've saved it and we'll share it. It's already a public map that I started with, so I'm just building upon that. And there's a number of things that I can do here. I can click this button to generate this HTML that I can use to embed this in a website. And let's take a look at one of those websites. So here if I go back to my home page, my city has a public website, and I've taken that map and I've embedded it right on the city's web page. And you can see that everything that we've configured, including the pop-ups about the crimes and including the pop-ups about the places of interest, is now here and available to me in this embedded web map. So it's very easy to leverage these in different ways. Another very interesting way that we can leverage these is in custom applications. Now it used to be you had to be a pretty good programmer to develop a custom GIS application, but these days anybody can do that. When I click this button, Make a Web Application, I'm presented with a gallery of templates that I can download and customize, or I can just use in place as configurable applications that will marry my map inside of these templates and let me do some interesting things. Let's take a look at one of these very quickly. Here's one that allows me to add some tweets so I can get some context from the community about it. So there's our map, and here's my little tweet dialogue. If I search for, try hashtag Washington, D.C., and we'll connect to those tweets and we'll see them on our map. So there they are, and I always have to apologize just in case I happen to click on an unfortunate one. But let's see what's happening now. So here we have what's going on around Washington, D.C. So very quickly I created a custom application, and I did that by configuring a web map, intelligent web map, very easily, and I married it with a template, and I'm off to go. Now there's lots more of these that we can leverage, and let me show you a few examples. I've put these on the gallery ribbon so we can take a closer look. Here's one that enables me to look at the 100-year flood zones within the city. And what I've done is I've created two maps, one which shows the flood zones on top of imagery and one which shows it on top of another base map, a base map we call the community base map. You can see these maps are locked together, and I can gain lots more context by being able to compare these. Let's take a look at another one. Here's a very interesting one. This is one of our story map templates. Alan Carroll, who used to be the chief cartographer for the National Geographic Society, is now with his encore career at Esri, and he and his team are evolving these story map templates. And this one's pretty interesting. I can follow these images, which take me through a tour of the mall. The map and the images are connected together, so as I navigate the map or browse through the images, we can see where we are. Now, these are part of a larger collection of story maps, which you can find at storymaps.esri.com, and I think these are important for geodesign. We want to tell a story about the designs that we're implementing, and this is a great way to provide public access, and there's lots of really interesting ones here. Here's Crisis in Syria. Here's one about the largest malls in the United States. So this was a popular story map that lots of people visited in the days leading up to the Christmas holidays when shopping was on everybody's mind. So you can take a tour of the largest malls here in the U.S. with this story map. So there's some very interesting things that we can find on the story map site. But let's go back to our organization and let's go back to that group that we were looking at, and let me show you a couple of other aspects. One aspect about geodesign is being able to collaborate over different designs, and what I've done here is I've taken a web map and I've built in a couple of bookmarks about areas that we'd like to plan some parks in. So let's go to the Henson Park Plan area, so I've bookmarked that, and I can now edit and add features to this map. So let's see, we have a road end up there. Let's establish a little parking area here. We'll digitize a little parking lot here. Now I've sort of gone outside my bounds there, but we won't worry about that for the moment. But there's our little parking lot. And let's go ahead and add a water feature. Water features are always nice for parks. So I see we have a little stream here, so let's create a water feature that's adjacent to the stream, kind of a kidney-shaped water feature, and let's add that. Let's go ahead and add a nice hiking trail that leads us from the parking lot and maybe takes us around the water feature, across private property here, and back again. And let's add some markers here. So let's see, we'll need to establish that as a parking area. Let's put a little trailhead sign here, and of course we always need a public restroom, so let's add that next to the trail. So I've made some very simple edits to this map, but other people can look at this map and they can edit it as well. And depending on how you implement these feature layers, these can be enterprise edits. So my edits currently are just stored within my map, but I can also store these back on the server so that anybody that's accessing the map can look at the current edits, and they can even look at different versions of those edits. And I think that's a very important part of geodesign. And let's take a look at one final thing. Now, in the program, it looks like I've been listed as the 2D enabling technology, but that's actually not entirely true. One of the new things that we've added to ArcGIS Online is 3D web maps. And what I'm doing now is I'm opening up a City Engine web scene. So this is a web scene of a design that's been created for a building, and we're able to view this now in a browser. And here it is. It happens to be the Esri campus, but it could be about new construction in the downtown area. Regional parks can be anything. Now here's one of the newer buildings on Esri, and what I'm able to do is take a look at this in a couple of different ways, one with the facade up and one with the facade removed, so that we can see the floor plan through there. So it's not just about 2D. ArcGIS Online is no longer 2D. Increasingly, it's becoming 3D as well. Now, one final aspect I'd like to show you is Esri Maps for Office. And I think this is really great, and of course it's a technology that will enable many more people outside of the GIS professionals at the end of the hallway. So this takes capabilities and puts them out into other departments within an organization, other departments which may not have had these capabilities in the past or been able to participate. Now I have a new little add-in here, and it shows up here as a tab. It's called Esri Maps. So I can click this add-in, and now we have our map tab here. Let me scroll down a little bit and we'll select some features. So we'll start with this row. We'll go back to the top and finish our selection here, and let's insert a map. So because I have Esri Maps for Office, I have access to all these different base maps that I can begin using to do my mapping. And what I'd like to do is take the contents of the spreadsheet and add it to the map. Now there's a couple of ways that I can do this. Actually, there's a number of ways. If I have address information, I can do it on address. In this case, I have lat long, so I can use that, and it automatically finds the fields that I can use to add it to my map. But I can also base this on familiar geographies, and I can create custom geographies. So if I am dealing with different geographies than counties or zip codes or states, I can create that as a layer and marry my data to that. Now you can see we've got a couple of outliers here in Africa. So these represent probably things I need to correct in my spreadsheet, but these happen to be crimes in the Washington, D.C. area. Not to highlight Washington, D.C. for crime, but you can see I've now made a map which shows these crimes here. I can change the look and feel of that. I can cluster these to make it a little more accessible. So here's 8 crimes that are in this area, and I can click to get more information, and I can also do some other interesting things like create a heat map of these crimes. And even more importantly, this isn't a one-way street. I can take the work that I've done and I can share it back into my organization and contribute to that ecosystem of geographic understanding. So it's pretty interesting that we have this vast ecosystem that supports many different kinds of users. Alrighty. So next what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn our attention to something else, the community analyst and also the landscape analyst. The landscape analyst can best be described as a collection of services right now which we're presenting through a community analyst-like experience. But what are these? The community analyst is about data access, it's about accessing reports, it's about visualizing information in different ways, and the community analyst is mostly about people. It's mostly about demographics and topics that cover that. Landscape analyst is a little bit different. It's about some of that, but it's also about adding other layers about the physical world, about biological world, about terrain and other things of interest. And let's take a look first at the community analyst. So here I am at the community analyst, and we'll begin by exploring my community. Now earlier recall that we looked at that heat map of crimes in Washington, D.C., and let's begin working with that in community analyst. So I connect to my organization, and here's my crime heat map that I'm going to add now into community analyst. Now I'm just scratching the surface of capabilities in community analyst, but what I want to do is highlight this particular capability, which I think is very interesting. So obviously we have a high density of crimes in this area. Normally when we generate reports, we do that based on standard geographies, counties, zip codes, and so forth. But in this case, I'm very interested in just a particular geography, a geography around where I seem to have uncovered a high incidence of crimes here. So we're digitizing an ad hoc geometry, and now I can get reports about what's going on here. And here's a big list of reports, and let's take a look at just a couple of these. So here's one that's flagged as most popular, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I'd like to select that report, and we'll run it now. What that means is I'm passing the geometry of my polygon, and it's generating the report based on that polygon, and even before I could finish describing it, it's done, and here's the report for that polygon, which tells me lots more information about that high crime area, race and ethnicity, population, and we have some nice charts which help us understand more. So very quickly and easily we can derive lots of information about things that we want to know more about. Now let's switch to landscape analyst. And for me, this was sort of a personal journey as I began to learn more about this. I do volunteer work in the Mojave National Preserve, and a while ago there was a project that happened to lift. It's a little controversial here in California. It was a big solar project, a huge solar project, the largest, certainly in the U.S., I think it might be among the largest in the world. And it happened to be plopped out in the middle of the desert, right adjacent to the Mojave National Preserve, right adjacent to critical tortoise habitat, near archaeological sites, and also near some secret caves that I found that I can't talk about. Now, you know, I was kind of chagrined that this thing kind of went through and all that stuff, but what I did as I began to explore landscape analysts is I thought, well, let's use this and I'll make it my mission to understand why that might be there if there's a better place for it. So here I am in the landscape analyst framework, and just like community analysts, it's got lots of nice help which helps us get started. And I'm going to zoom in around that area of Las Vegas where the Ivanpah solar facility is going into place. So there's Las Vegas, and here's the valley that it's located in. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to get some information about these maps and be able to identify the different features that might make one area suitable for a task over another. So here I get to choose my variables. Now, if I'm looking at citing solar things, well, maybe the first thing I might consider is things of a physical nature. Terrain is important. We want to put these solar collectors in the flat area because the cost of constructing that would be lower. So slope would be something I'm interested in. So that's one variable I will choose. But there's other variables that I'm interested in. There's biological variables, that critical desert tortoise habitat that I talked about. So let's now select the desert tortoise habitat. You can see there's lots of different factors, and this is a growing list. This is just beginning to lift right now. Let's add that as another variable I want to explore, and let's add one more. Obviously, I'm interested in the economic success of this solar generating area. So what I'd like to do is tap into natural resources and look at the acres of land that are considered to be of high solar potential. So I've chosen 3 variables, and now I can look at these variables in the context of them and begin experimenting and identifying areas that meet the criteria that I'm after. So right now we're retrieving data, and if I'm lucky, I will have zoomed into the Huck 12 area, and I am. So here you are looking at the Huck 12 boundaries, and now we can begin playing with these variables. Now I'm interested in areas with low slope. So you can see as I adjust this slider, we're excluding high slope areas. Pretty visual, pretty neat. I'm also interested in areas of critical habitat, and I want to minimize that. So anywhere where there's critical habitat areas that are high, I want to exclude them from my selection, so I can begin excluding those. And I'm also looking for areas where there's the highest solar potential. Now, an interesting thing is that this area here is exactly the area that the Ivanpah solar plant is being registered. So I think someone actually did their homework, and as much as I'm still sort of opposed to it, it's happening, but now I understand why. So these are areas where the slope is flat. It's actually in areas where there's low density critical habitat and there's high solar potential, and I can contrast that to other areas, and where it doesn't meet my criteria, you can see that's highlighted in red. So the landscape analyst becomes a very important part of some of the tools that we can use for our geodesign. Let's take a look at one more new thing that's coming up on the horizon. And this is more of a category or theme of things which we call geo-enrichment. Currently, these are ArcGIS online services which I can tap into and bring into the context of custom applications that might suit specific workflows, but these will continue to evolve in many different ways. And let's take a look at these geo-enrichment services now. It's important to hit the correct button. Okay, so this is our current little prototype site for geo-enrichment, and let's take a look at these. Let's begin with income data. And again, this is a custom application that's connecting to these geo-enrichment services, which lets us do some interesting things. When I click on the map, I get a 1-mile radius around where I click, and using this geo-enrichment services, I develop the report. So in this area, I click just to the east of Berkeley, I see that, well, the highest category of household income is actually a very low category, less than $15,000 a year. Berkeley, that might sound odd. Why is that? Well, it's because I happen to click right in the middle of the UC Berkeley campus there. So obviously these are students, and that's what I see there. Now let's go over to Mill Valley. Mill Valley is one of my favorite places. I can't afford to live there. But it is a high income area, and I can see that the greatest category of income here are households that are earning more than $200,000 a year. Now, what's also interesting about this is I can see the deviations below or above, below in red, above in black, and I can compare that to entire Marin County. I can compare that to California, and I can also compare that to the entire United States. So this is a very interesting way that we can browse and glean more information out of this data. Let's take a look at another example. This one's also very interesting. This is an age pyramid. So let's once again click in Berkeley, and we see some pretty interesting results. Obviously, the highest age pyramid here is, or the highest category is men and women that are age 20 to 24. Obviously, there are students here, but I can compare this to the rest of Alameda County, to the state of California, and also to the whole of the United States. So you can see they're roughly in line, but this is an area that's a little bit different. Let's go back to Mill Valley and take a look at that area, and I can see this is quite different. It's even quite different than what we see in the United States, or what we see in California, or what we see in, actually it's pretty typical for Marin County. So we see that most of them are women age 50 to 54, and there's also men in that same category. Obviously, this is the top income earning years of one's career, and that's why those folks get to live in Mill Valley. So what I'm hoping that I've done is I've provided at least just a little bit of a showcase that helps us understand some of the new technologies that are coming, some of the technologies that exist today. I think our mission is to look at new and interesting ways that we can transform our work geospatially. Thank you very much.